Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're going to take a little bit of a break from doing real repair because one of our viewers, fellow goes by the handle Zero Knot, has caught on that I was doing some fishing rod repair. I got a series of about 50 rods in from a charter boat that are pretty old rods, and the rods are starting to lose their guides. There's been some significant rust on them, and in some cases they've snapped off and need to be replaced. And normally you would probably give up on a rod like this. It's going to need several guides, but he can't find the blanks, and he can't find the ones that have the strength and the size to fit what is ideal for his fishing. So he asked me if I could go ahead and replace the eyes. Now, as a disclaimer, I am not a custom rod builder. I'm not a professional at this. I know enough to get by and be dangerous. But somebody asked, can you show me how you are tying your guides on? And I said, sure, why not? Let's go do that. So first thing you want to do is remove the old guide. Now up here on this one that's still intact, you're going to notice that the guide is epoxied on. There's thread first, then epoxy. And you can do this two ways. You can get a sharp utility knife, and you can kind of scrape off the top, break the thread, and then pull this out. Or if you want to be quick about it, you can take a heat source like a plumber's torch, put it right on to where the metal piece of that guide is coming down the rod blank. Hold it until you see it kind of crisp up, and then that'll do two things. It'll melt the epoxy, and it'll heat up the guide, and you'll be able to just cut right through that with this knife. And then once you cut through the knife with the knife, you'll have a little bit remaining. Just use a pliers or something to kind of pull the rest of it off. It'll come off like a piece of tape. And here's an example of that, how it kind of just curled right off after it was removed. So you got to remove first. And let's talk a little bit about what you're going to need for this. You can wrap rods by hand. That's the way I choose to do it. As I mentioned, I don't do high volumes of this, and I also don't do a high-quality custom job, if you will. What I'm doing is the same thing that I do as it relates to the whole notion behind Second Chance Tackle, and that is to get out there and make these pieces functional. So this is a matter of function rather than art, and it's a matter of getting these things back out there fishing and having a second chance. What you need is something to hold your rod. In this case, I made a little jig. There's three pieces of this, one in the butt, one in the center, one up at the rod tip, and I use the jig so that I can twirl the rod and let that do all of the wrapping for me. Now there's professional machines out there that'll spin it automatically for you and the like. I don't use it. Again, I don't do enough of it that it matters. You will need thread, and I use just simple embroiderer's thread, and you don't need this. This is a bobbin. You don't need it. I happen to use it because I tie jigs and some other things, but you do not need this. You can simply get a spool of the thread and work it by hand. And if you're doing an emergency repair, one eyelet or two eyelets, well, you don't need to do too much beyond that. So let's take you through some of the basics that I do. We'll see how it lines up. Again, full disclaimer, I am not a custom rod maker. This is function, not art. There's a lot of ways to do this, and a lot of folks know a whole lot more about it than I do. But because you asked, here I am doing. First thing you want to do is make sure that your guides are in a straight line. This one was real easy because I have the indentations where the guides that I removed that are. They're already marked. So I'm going to get a replacement eye, which I've ordered a whole pile of them of. This happens to be a Pacific Bay eye. It's got they call them snake eyes. They're kind of rounded out. Very hard to break. They're ideal for a saltwater environment. They're ideal for a charter boat environment. What I like to do then is I like to put the first one where it belongs, and I work on the longer side first. So I'm going to put that right over the indentation. I'm going to grab a piece of masking tape, I'm going to tape it so that I hold it on to the panel. Next, I'm going to line up the back or tail end of that, and then I'm going to get my embroiderer's thread. Now I start with kind of an X loop. I'm going to run the thread around, and then I'm going to wrap this tag end over, and I'm going to keep it right in line with the arm coming off that guide. And then I'm simply going to do 1 or 2 wraps to hold everything in place and go back to where I start. I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch below where that line guide joins, just so that I can have uniformity. After a couple of wraps, I can take the long end of that string, take that off now, it's kind of set. And we're just going to work our way up. I'm going to hold the thread even. I'm going to make sure that it goes side by side as I travel up the eyelet guide. And I'm just going to take my time, kind of wrap as best I can, keeping good tension on the thread and trying to keep the line or the threads close together. Now if they get out of line like this a little bit, just you can pinch it over with your fingers. You can use a burnisher. They make burnishers. You can use a popsicle stick. You can use the back of a utility knife. You can use just about anything that kind of resembles your fingernail, I guess. And then we're just going to keep working up. Now again, the folks that are the purists, they're going to have, you know, a set sequence to do this and how to keep it to not only be functional but look good. And I've been concentrating on both. I'd like to have it look as good as it can, but also to make sure that it's functional so that the rod can go back out. So you can see that we can progress pretty well. And we cover the gaps and everything. But this is a good time to tell you while I continue to wrap. If you enjoy the art of reel repair, if you like to see how reels are made, how they come together, how maybe they come apart, why they break, how to diagnose and repair those, well then I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you subscribe to my channel, please hit the notification button. And when you hit that notification button, you'll see when I'm posting videos. And you'll be able to judge whether that's a video you want to see. And if you do, then it'll be ready for you to take a view. If you have questions, Zero Naught had a question, how do I do this? And I mentioned there's a lot of different ways folks do this. This is just one of them. The best way to do that is leave it in the comments section. I do try to answer questions in the comments section, and if you have one, I'll try and get to you on that. So you can see this takes a few minutes, and it's almost relaxing as opposed to some of the things that I get involved in from day to day. And every now and then something like this comes in where the fella just wants to get his rods out there going again. So I'll call these emergency repairs. I certainly am not going to call this custom rod building or anything like that. But you're getting the idea here, and we're getting close. Now again, if you didn't have that bobbin, you would be holding the thread of the spool like this, and just keeping tension on it as you move your way up. Okay, well we're getting close to the point where we're going to be at the end of the row here. And a special shout out, I met George. She's a rod builder at a recent fishing expo that we were doing. And boy, she does some beautiful work. This is not in her league. This is how to replace a eyelet, not how to do a full-blown rod build. All right, so when you get about 1/4 of an inch from the end of the line guide, you want to start preparing yourself for the finished knot. So I'm going to use a piece of monofilament that's probably hard to see on the camera. This is 8-pound test monofilament. I find that kind of has the right strength and also is thin enough to work on my final knot. I take a loop of it, kind of run it through with an overhand knot, and pull that loop through so that I have a loop. Yeah, hopefully it's seen here. When I get that loop, I'm going to put that loop onto the pole now, and I like to keep it near the metal extension of that guide. I'm just going to run the thread over it once here to hold it in place. And then I'm going to continue wrapping that last 1/4 of an inch. So if you really want to see how the pros do it, there's a nice video on YouTube, I think, from Mudhole Outfitters, I think, or Mudhole something. They have rod building classes online, and they show you all kinds of things about the right equipment and all of that sort of stuff. It's a well spent half an hour or an hour to see a couple of their episodes to learn how to go build that custom rod of yours. Of course, right now we're just telling you how to make a rod worthy of going back out. So there you go. I'm wrapped up with the thread now. I have the loop that's kind of hanging through here. And I finish this by bringing an extension off of that thread, holding that thread nice and tight, and then cutting the thread so that I'm no longer attached to the spool. Now with the tension on the thread, I want to go through the hole of that I made in that loop, keeping that tension onto the string, and now pull the monofilament, and you'll notice that the string pulls through that last 1/4 of an inch, and that becomes your knot. Now, the folks that are building the rods are going to do it a whole lot better than me. They're going to use a razor blade here. I'm just going to use a scissor for now. And then again, you can use the back of a knife. Use anything. You can tighten those little spaces up. So how do you finish that then? Well, you're going to do the other side of that. When you do the other side of it, it's going to look like this. You're going to have both sides of the eyelet done. But I like to start with the tail end. You're going to finish that with epoxy. Now, there's 2 types of epoxy. There's the epoxy that I guess most of us are familiar with when we break a dish or need to mend something, like the Gorilla Glue one. This is epoxy glue. You really don't want the epoxy glue for the finishing here. What you want is an epoxy finisher. This is rod wrapping kit. It's a flex coat kit. It gives you everything you need. It's got syringes, it's got brushes, it's got measuring cups, and most importantly, it's got the 2-part formula. It's got the epoxy and the hardener. And in order to finish this now, you're going to need to mix equal parts of the hardener and the epoxy. They have syringes in this kit so that you can measure them equally. Give you a little measuring cup here if you want to use the measuring cup. You're going to mix it well. You're going to get a brush. They have some brushes in there. When I go to finish them, I prefer these flat artist brushes. They're not very expensive. And you're going to pick one that's appropriate for the width here, so maybe 1 or 2 of these. With that epoxy mixed, you're going to do the same thing you did with the thread. You're going to hold the brush onto the blank with the brush loaded with the epoxy, and you're going to turn the pole. Don't brush the brush, turn the pole. That'll get you an even spread. It'll fill in some of those indentations. And once the epoxy is in there, you're going to need to continue to turn the rod occasionally. Start with maybe every 15 seconds, and then as it starts to set up, you can back off a little bit. They make professional rod dryers. Those dryers turn at 9 or 18 revolutions per minute. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to give you, well, this is a horrible example, but that's what's going to give you the finished touch to the rod using that rod dryer. So there you go. I've done about 70 of these eyelets so far. I'm getting ready to just finish the last few of these, and then I'll be doing the epoxy on them and getting these back out, giving this rod a second chance. So to Zero Naught and to everybody who asked questions, thank you for watching. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for all you've been doing during the pandemic. To everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.